Hi, I'm Dan Pasternak. We're here in Santa Barbara, California. It is October the 11th, 2002, and I am looking forward to now spending a bit of time with a man that Steve Allen once called the most influential comedian since Jackie Gleason, and a man who personally has made me laugh a lot, Mr. Jonathan Winters. We're going to talk a bit about
Well,
television.
good. I hope so.
All right, Mr. Winters, we're going to start with a little basic background information.
Okay.
Just to begin, what was your name at birth?
Boy, it's like this. Jonathan Harshman Winters III. Cut down today to just Jonathan.
And did you have any nicknames in childhood?
Uh, some that I think, yeah, I guess there were some nicknames. I passed on. Nothing that really stuck with me. No, I was just pretty much Johnny Winters, and that was pretty much it.
Tell us when you were born.
November 11th, 1925,
And where were you born?
Dayton, Ohio.
And where'd you grow up?
I was born in Dayton, and I spent the first 7 years of my life in Dayton with my mother and my father. And he, I guess, I don't guess, was practicing alcoholism and getting A's. And he was an alcoholic, and my mother decided that maybe we should part. So at age 7, left Dayton, and we moved 25 miles north to Springfield, Ohio, and went to live with my grandmother, my mother's mother. And by this time, we're talking about, I was born in 25, so 32, about 1932. The Depression had happened at 29, and so it was a big house that my grandmother had, and a fun house. Today, it's interesting, it's become a funeral home. But at that time, it was on about 2 or 3 acres and a large cement driveway and a big house, which was sort of, trying to think what kind of architecture, somewhat colonial type of housing. But at any rate, I lived there and spent, I guess, the bulk of my years, I went back and forth to see my father, or he'd come up and get me. And those were difficult years. I think I'm not just, singling out my father, my family. Needless to say, what you hear today was a dysfunctional family. And I was always trying to hope, and my dreams are kind of screwed up, to say the least, because I was always dreaming that my father would pull himself out of this problem. And I think a lot of kids feel that way about their parents today, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or anything else, that maybe they were going to get back together. And of course they didn't. He, fortunately for all of us, it became too late because my mother had already divorced him, but he, when the Second War broke out, he stopped drinking and remarried, and so did my mother. But growing up was not easy for me because I wasn't the ideal student by any matter of means. I was always kind of looking out the window and wondering what season we were in. And then I'd look over to the other side and see an attractive gal my age, whether it be first or second or eighth grade, and maybe at recess, I'll hand you some potato chips. But my main problem, I'm not a crybaby. I've cried a lot, but I'm not a crybaby. Certainly a professional crybaby. I really don't have time for them, and I understand a lot of their tears, and their being shy, uneasy, a lot of hang-ups and this and that, whether it be disease or mental or physical. But I think for me to just sit back and constantly complain, I just don't buy it from the standpoint, whatever happened to me in my background, which were a lot of things, I have to look today, and I'm almost 77 next month. I've come a long way since Dayton and Springfield, Ohio. But at any rate, to make a long, just giving you bits and pieces here, I started out in the first grade, well, I guess kindergarten, which is something in itself. That's just little balls of clay and some middle-aged woman saying, "What have we made here? Isn't this something?" "What do you think it is?" "Is this a tomato?" "No, this is the head of a little dog." "I see." Well, to me it was the head of a little dog, but to her it was a tomato. I didn't know whether she graduated from school eventually or taught or just had mental problems herself. At any rate, first grade was my dad, who at that time, again, we go back to he was drinking, and he would stop drinking long enough to kind of stick it to me, verbally, and he'd say, he loved math. A lot of people love math, can't understand people who don't. And they're quick to tell you, you're a little thick, dumb, slow. I found that interesting thing about the various labels that one gets. Rich kids, for the most kids, wealthy children and students, men, people, are labeled sometimes slow, where in reality they're stupid. But they're labeled because they're wealthy and they can buy the school and all the teachers and give a building for people to shoot baskets. So they're slow, whereas a poor kid is stupid. He's dumb. One thing about dumb kids and stupid kids, they're usually very strong. With all their frailties and their drawbacks, they know they're strong. And they know they're stupid, but they can beat up on you. So you'd best be careful. They will jump out at you with all your little books, or maybe you don't need books. Maybe you maintain everything and you're gourd, and they jump out on you and beat the crap out of you. So it behooves you to look into the stupid and the people. Anyway, my dad said to me in the first grade, he said, and as I say again, he loved math. I guess he counted bottles and drinks and cars and lots of jobs and things in papers, and those were numbers of things he did. So he'd say, if I give you 3 apples and 4 more, how many do you have? And I'd stop and keep in mind, first grade, and I'd say, too many for the lunchbox. And he'd grab me and say, you little bastard. So I would cry. And because his whole world and what he tried to transfer to me was math. It's not to say that much of our world today is math. The science program, look at the computers, the people with their little funny things here. And we're off into space and everything. So there's a lot to be said about math.
Now, what did your father do for a living?
Well, he started out when my grandfather had a bank in Dayton, and then my father was in the bank for about an hour and a half. Apparently somebody locked him in the vault, and they were, upset with him or something. He drank his way out. Kind of a Count of Monte Cristo thing. At any rate, my dad, being an alcoholic, was a plumber, worked for the government for a while, worked for Chrysler Air Temp, which was air conditioning unit, and all kinds of jobs. CPA at one time, sold insurance, endless amount of jobs. And then when he stopped drinking, then he got his act together. And he wasn't a real dummy by any matter of means. He hadn't, lost his marbles entirely. And he'd gone a year to Yale, which was a good grade. He once said it was as good at 4 years, at a place like Otterbein in Ohio or Baylor. He thought that 1 year at Yale, and it's true, at his time when he went through, the class of 21, he said, I could never be ambassador to the court of St. James or ambassador to France and live in Paris, but I'd probably get Uruguay. So they believed that, and many did get it. According to what party was in power, they'd send you, to South Africa. And you have some drinks here, a few gins, and let the people come near the bushes there after all. Well, at any rate, he worked at a lot of jobs, and then I in getting it had become, as I'm pointing out, from the first grade right up through the time that I finally quit high school when I was 17. I went in the Marines. I had struggled, and I got through it. Long division was algebra. I got to algebra, had to be tutored. Then I got to geometry, and that really just that was the beginning of the end. It was the end. And I went up to the teacher and I said, I'm out of here. And, well, what's going to happen to you? And I said, oh, I've got the papers on me. I'm going to the Marines. Well, you're 17 years old. I had to get my, permission from my parents. They leaped at it. Go. It's like a big summer camp. You'll have a good time.
Talk about serving in the Marine Corps.
That was something. It was more than a summer camp. Usually came home, you see, after summer camp, whereas in the Marines, you don't come home, either in a bag or maybe in a parade or something. I went in because my old man was in there. I go back to this. A lot of this obviously centered around my dad. I was always going back for his stamp of approval, and I had so little to go on because my grades were rather sad, to say the least. He'd been a captain in the Army during peacetime, and 3C, Civilian Conservation Corps, and he was cashiered, got a BCD, bad conduct discharge, because of his alcoholism. And, here you are, he was out in Utah and Idaho picking up pine cones with guys who had escaped from Guadalajara, and a couple of Mormon guys in the trees, looking down at him. So it seems to, years passed by, and I thought, gosh, to get cashiered out of the Civilian Conservation Corps, be a captain. Well, at any rate, I went in the Marines, and my mother, here were Greeks, Greek Americans, Italian Americans, black African Americans, grabbing each other, saying, oh, God, take care of yourself, don't die. And my mother said, she was not that far away, her thinking about me, than my father was. Interesting. And she said, don't miss this train. Get on the train right away. Time for kisses when you come home. So I thought we'd lived in Germany, and they were a little cool. Not that they were Nazis or anything like that, but the Germanic kind of, no time for kisses. So I went in the Marines, went to Parris Island, got through that. And then the two of us, trying to think of the guy's name, I can't think of it right now, were chosen for sea school. I was to go aboard and did aboard the Wisconsin battleship, and he went aboard the Ticonderoga. I was on the Wisconsin. She was commissioned and was to pull out of Philadelphia for a shakedown. And I came down with nephritis, kidney disease. So I was 3 months on my back in Philadelphia Naval Hospital, and then 3 months on my feet at outside of Philadelphia at a rehab center. So I thought I'd prepared myself to go home, and I was fooled, as I was constantly. I think Winters, you're going to go aboard the, get ready to go aboard the Bonhomme Richard, CV-31, which is a Essex-class carrier, the big carrier. So I said, boy, I made my plans, not that I had turned another way and was yellow or frightened or copping out, but it's like anybody, having gone 6 months in the hospital, having not been wounded. I saw one guy from my outfit was from in Parris Island. My platoon was a guy called Fittipaldo who had lost his leg. And I said to him, hey, Fitty, I was going up on the third floor to get some sunshine. I'm in a wheelchair myself. And he said, I said, what happened to the guys that were at Parris Island, our platoon? Well, John, they all went to Saipan. They got wiped out. I'm one of the few survivors. That kind of shook me, and I thought, ooh. Well, then I went on the Bonhomme Richard. I get taken off the Wisconsin, I say, went on the Bonhomme Richard, where I was anti-aircraft and pom-poms, as they call them, 40 millimeters and 20s, and then Admiral's Orderly. It sounds like, and is to a great deal like like a cushion kind of job to be in. And compared to the land and going hitting the beaches and fighting Japanese or whoever you're fighting, I mean, they're up in the trees and everything else. It's very much a cushion job in comparison to what they went through. But you're also sitting on a huge gasoline station because it's just loaded with gas. And we were on the second, just below the hangar deck. And there's a big red cross, I'll never forget, an X. And that's where the munitions were. So my bunk was over that. It was always a nice thing before I retired in the evening, look down and see this thing. Boy, if they hit that thing, you go. I found the interesting thing, I go on about the war. I did one show during the war. Keep in mind, there were 75 Marines on the carrier. This is World War II. And the complement of sailors was about 2,200. Today it's 5,000. Gives you an idea on the nuclear jobs. I got up and did impersonations and stuff, kind of crazy, simple stuff. I had no material, had no real act. But I won, and I thought to myself, God, there are 2,000 Swabbies. They hate the Marines. But I won a big tankard of ice cream, 5 gallons, which when it arrived, 74 other Marines got to it, and I had one scoop.
Was this the first time you'd ever performed?
No, I'd performed in civilian life. I started out in the 4th grade as playing Old King Cole with a cardboard crown and this and that. And a couple of times locally in Springfield for $25 for hamburgers and 3 days on the weekend or something, but strictly amateur stuff. Not a lot. When you think a lot of people did a lot of amateur work, I did the bulk of my career started in '49.
But at this point, were you thinking about this as a career, or were you just kind of having fun?
I think I really just having fun. I had a lot of dreams about what I wanted to do. I think one of the things I wanted to do, and I knew almost instantly I'd never be able to do it, I wanted to be a fighter pilot because I'd grown up in Dayton. I shook hands with Orville Wright, the 2 Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur. And Mr. Wright, I think I was 12, 13 years old. And I thought, God, this guy's from Dayton, Ohio, and he'd known my grandfather. And they'd gone to school together. And later on, I met Neil Armstrong, who's from Wapakoneta, Ohio, who was the first man to step on the moon. But my thing was I wanted to fly. But I knew going in. I knew in high school if I was going to have trouble with algebra and geometry, I couldn't fly, even though it was much simpler in those days than it is now with a jet. So
talk about what you did then after you got out of the service, after you were discharged.
Okay. After I got out of the service, I just wanted to make one point about the carrier. I was on the carrier for a year. And I had a lot of feelings about the Marines. I mean, being in the Marines, serving and one thing, and I thought most of my outfit was killed on Saipan. Most of my fellow Marines had been killed in one thing or another. Hospitalization, I saw a lot of guys. I felt very guilty, I think, that I didn't go in for some reason. A warped kind of guilt, but I felt lucky, but I felt guilty too. The thing was that always is kind of fascinating to this day. The carrier I was on, CV-31, Essex-class carrier, the Bonhomme Richard, was the only carrier in the Pacific Fleet that wasn't hit, and hit hard. You think of the Ticonderoga, the Essex, the Shangri-La, the Franklin, the Hancock, I can name them all, Ticonderoga. And most of the Marines, interesting enough, were killed on those carriers. We saw a Zero coming out of the sun, and she just missed us, or he just missed us. And I can remember seeing the Japanese guy in that bubble, that canopy going right over the side. But today, now, needless to say, looking back, I consider myself damn lucky that I made it through. And I did what I could for my country or with them. I'm not any super patriot, but I was glad I went through it. I think that if you don't get killed, that's the worst, and crippled for life, and somehow make it through, it can be a warped but fascinating tour of duty. But that's up to the individual. It's a very very difficult thing to sell to any young man. I find it I'd be a tough recruiter. But if you have to be there to understand what it's like.
So
There's a camaraderie, I guess that's what I'm saying. Anyway, coming out of the Marines, I was, again, at 20, I really didn't really know what I was going to do. My father, again, had said, and my mother kind of, well, dear, I assume you're going to go to college. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to study. And then the hostility sets in. Doesn't make any difference what you want to study. You take a liberal arts. That's what most of them are taking. That and a few drinks and sit on some part of a Ford station wagon and watch a football game and take biology 5. That's just butterflies that are endangered. And then come home and work in one of the factories. How would I work in the factory? Why go to college for 4 years to work in the factory? Oh, where the white-collar guys are. Forget the lathe. Wonderful. Well, I went to college, and I always say I lasted about an hour. It was a little longer, about a year. Paul Newman, famous actor, very attractive guy, was a year ahead of me, very bright. And I was pretty slow. Vocabularies I took Latin. I'm dating myself, but I kept saying to myself, all this Latin's eat, lectus, mudus, rudus, etatus, weenie, weenie, wiki, all this. Where am I going to use this? On the street? Hey, weenie, weenie, wiki. Gladius maxima mudus, brogus etatus. Oh, Jesus. That doesn't get you on the bus. So I was a problem. I was a problem to the teacher and I was a problem to myself. But I went to Kenyon and I just thought, this isn't what I want to do. First off, for me, and I'm telling tales in school, not out, I was always very taken with girls. I still am, only now I've been married 54 years and I'm taken with this woman that I live with because now I can look, you see. I go over here and look, and that's all I can do. At 77, pretty much looking, oh, neat. And let it go. Let it go. Don't take out 12 in-bag glossies where she's nude and, Hugh Hefner's in a bathrobe endorsing it. At any rate, I was very interested in girls. I wanted to get married, had no money. It's always a problem. No car. When I got out of the service, my mother, who was tough, very talented, very sharp, but tough. And she had a radio show. I would probably, if there's any role model in the family itself, it would be my mother. She was kind of an Arlene Francis. I guess more like Arlene and what's the other lady today who's interviews a lot of people on ABC?
Barbara Walters?
Yeah, that kind of, had a show where she interviewed people. And when I came out of the Corps, she had a little 38 Ford. Now I got out in 46, and it was a 38 Ford. So I said, would you give me the car? I was an only child, by the way, so I expected to get something other than 2 couches and a set of china. And I wanted to get it early, before anybody went. So I said, would you give me the car? I've spent 3 years in the Marines. Yeah, we know about that. You're home now. Yeah. The car is $350. My God. That's all I have. Nobody gave it to me. There's 3.5. Do you intend to stay here in the house? I don't. I'm going to sleep by that cottonwood tree. Well, that'll be $20 a week. Yeah, your stepfather and I are still paying on the house. You think it's a free lunch? You want to sit under Coors, smoke a joint and suck on Coors, and wait for the Reds to play in Cincinnati? Move your butt. Whew, boy, boot camp was a joke. Well, I said, there's 3.5, here's 20. You better find a job by Monday. Otherwise, don't come back here. Well, I found a job, such as it was. I'd gone to college. I'm going back and forth there. I had college for about a year. I wanted to go to art school because I'd always made little sketches and cartoons and stuff. Not that I'd had anything published, but I had a feeling about art. I still do, and I still paint. So I turned to my dad, and it was always, well, what are we going to do now? We dropped out of college. Why? Aren't any women there? No, there were 600 guys. I want to go to a place where it's coeducational. That's too bad. Well, forget it. What are you going to do now? Now, you have to keep in mind, I was the type of kid, Victorian times or any times, I didn't talk back to older people, and certainly to any older people in my family. You said sir, or mother this, or dad, or, and snap your face. Hey, Pops, come over and sit down. I'll tell you about it. None of that. What are you going to do? And I told him flat out, I said, I want to go to art school. You're not a homosexual. And for the first time since God, I was so tempted that I did it. And I said, I find you attractive. Well, Dad, you know, the Marines are the Marines. At least I didn't throw grenades like this. I was able to lob them, you know. And I'm a little effeminate, and I think if you would come downtown with me, we'd pick out something that's fairly attractive. It doesn't have to be you know, something from Taylor, you know, I. Miller shoes. And, well, he said, gee, you are. You're a queer. Well, I don't know. I feel creative. We can't all be straight, macho, and butchy. This guy said, Jesus, this is my old man. Jesus, God. Well, shortly after that, I got married. My wife and
I'm sure he was pleased.
Oh, sure. He came to the wedding like this. I was tempted to wear her dress, you see, and put her in a tuxedo, but I didn't want to do that because then the whole church had unloaded. At any rate, I got married. My wife got her master's degree at Ohio State. She'd been to Miami of Ohio, Drake University, and I'm all over Sarasota, and a lot of credits. And I was in my third year of art school. So I said, she said, you know, I've watched your paintings and seen your paintings, and I know you're interested in becoming an artist. I married you because you've got a great sense of humor. Now, there was a show at the Colonial Theater, which is gone now, in Dayton. They gave away a wristwatch. She said, why don't you go down and see if you can win that wristwatch? Well, a cocky time in my life anyway, 23, 24 years old. I'll go down, sure. And I did my little routine that I pieced together at other places.
Now, what was this routine?
Routine was, of all places, Indianapolis Speedway, and the cars doing sound like, and here we have Clark Gable here. Clark, we understand that you've enjoyed driving one of the cars, certainly at the trials. Well, you know, it's sweetheart. It's a great time to be there, baby. And I do, you know, various Boris Karloff or mechanic or something. And I won, and I got the watch. And 3 days passed, and I got a telephone call, and the guy said, this is Charlie Rader from WING. Jonathan, would you consider coming on to WING and being a disc jockey? And I said, disc jockey, I have no knowledge, and I love jazz. Nat Cole, Duke Ellington, you know, Count Basie, I'm a big bug on that. But as far as, you know, other things,
Mr. Winters, I think
Yeah.
we have to change tape.
okay?